This is part 3 of my video tutorial on working with swags. And in this segment I'm going to talk exclusively about working with either pre-made plywood or with plywood that you simulate by gluing up your own thin pieces of wood. The basis of working with plywood and getting interesting effects easily without fidgety angles or difficult glue-ups is to use the same hexagon that I developed for the footed candy dish. I keep mentioning this particular project over and over because it was through the use of the hexagon that I was able to explore many different directions and come up with some really neat things that I could not have anticipated. In this glue-up that I showed you in the earlier videos, you have the hexagon, and I glued up strips about, I'd say about 1/2 an inch total thickness, which is what you would typically do if you were going to glue up a swag. And we'll talk about the swags a little later. But if I want to make a ring that has an interesting, that gives you the interesting plywood glue up, a center ring, the way you do this is to vary it by making your glue up at least 3/4 of an inch wide. Then when you cut your ring, the entire ring will consist of your plywood. Instead of with a narrower ring, the inside has your hexagon wood. So when you're doing the glue up for an interesting center ring, your middle can be plywood, it can be scrap wood. It only serves as a place to glue up your wood. And for this bowl, what I did was I used it in the middle in a manner similar to the projects in chapter 5 of my book, in which you're dealing with projects that use more than one set of rings. Right? And that was glued in and sanded around the midpoint. It's as though you drew a line in the middle and sanded an angle on either side. And you can set this ring at the same plane as the rings that surround it, that they protrude the same amount, the angled rings, or you can have this ring protrude a little bit, maybe 1/8 of an inch all around if you want to get a slightly steeper angle. It all depends on the effect that you want. Now the interesting thing, and this was a completely surprise discovery, was that when I sanded the inside, since I was making a bowl and I needed the inside to be nicely sanded, I got a very interesting effect as well. And that's why you make it wider, so the entire ring is made up of your colored plies. All right, now, in this bowl, I tried a combination of the two. This was made, the center decoration was made of 3 sets glued up around octagons. The top and bottom formed swags, as I showed you a moment ago. The middle ring was done like this. The 3 blanks were glued up as identically as I could make them. And the alignment is pretty good. It's not perfect, but because I used plywood for this, it was a very nice quality plywood that came from an old bed rail that a member of our wood club donated to the cause. It looks nice, you can get away with it. So if you want to start experimenting, try plywood, with good sound plies. It saves you the trouble and expense of gluing up your own wood, and you can start learning how to work with it. So it was, as they say, close but no cigar. And I decided that if I were going to use regular wood, which is less forgiving, it would simply look sloppy and mismatched. So I decided, and this is a work in process, to build in some forgiveness. I'm not going to take the time to align these perfectly, but you get the idea and you know how to do it. And at some point I'm going to start shaping these so it looks a little bit more elegant. I glued up these 2 blanks as closely as I could. At the octagon stage, I taped them together with double-sided tape. I sanded the edges so any irregularities would be there on both of them. and I kept my glued up pieces as closely matched as I could. So that the alignment is actually pretty good. If I take these two and put them together, it looks like it just might work. However, sad experience has taught me that most of them will line up. One or two of them will not, and it will be annoying because it won't quite be what you wanted. But to make that more forgiving, what I did was I glued up a ring which consists of a piece of 1/8 inch yellow heart, and I treated myself to some 1/16 of an inch veneer, which would give me a little more color than the regular thickness of veneer, but not the same, as much thickness as an 1/8 inch piece of wood would do. It's the first time I'm working with it, and it was really nice. In making this, I did not have enough yellow heart that was wide enough. I had bought something called veneer tape that people who work with veneer use to keep pieces of veneer in line when they glue things up. And I glued my yellow heart together using the tape to hold it in place, and it worked beautifully. As I looked over this, I cannot tell where the seam was. And it was economical because thin wood, particularly when you don't resaw your own, is very pricey. Now, what I am going to do when I continue working on this bowl the next day or two in the shop is I'm going to insert this ring in between. I'm going to get these as well aligned as I can. I may do a little sanding. These I did a little sanding because I wanted to be able to see what I had. And by inserting this ring, the eye is going to follow it around. It's going to follow the curve around to see what it wants to see. And any small irregularities are not going to appear. You can use a wider ring if you want. I like using pieces of wood, say 1/2 inch, with veneer on either side would be very nice. I'm finding that adding thin pieces of veneer, let's see, I think I did that here, right on the bottom of this rim, and I added veneer to the top and bottom of this ring. Adds a little bit more elegance for very little extra cost. I am going through a lot of glue, but I think it's well worth it. And then once this is glued up, then I will sand the inside and continue with this, adding on the rings in the customary manner. And I haven't decided yet on the shape, whether I'm going to make a closed bowl, whether I'm going to make an open bowl. I may wait and see what this looks like. If it's really pretty, I may keep it open. If it's not so pretty, then I will close it up so that it becomes invisible. But these are some of the options, so that using these basic principles for swags, whether they're shallow swags or deeper swags, with a little attention following the tips that I've given you to the glue up, you'll find that you will have much less trouble, and you can get some pretty amazing effects with very little extra effort. So good luck with your bowls, and feel free to let me know how you do. Thanks for watching.